When I got arrested at 22 years old, I was very immature, reckless.
I'm finally in a position where I'm able to make a positive impact in my community.
The sky's the limit with this program.
Welcome to Prison to Purpose, Building Futures Behind Bars. I'm your host, Michelle Kane. We are talking about commercial diving. And in our previous episode, if you listened, we were talking about the dive program at Chino, and it's at the California Institution for Men. And people have no idea that diving inside prison is happening. And it's not just what you think. It's not just pools of water. This is intense commercial diving with certifications attached to it. This is run by the California Correctional Training and Rehabilitation Authority. And joining me right now is the assistant diving instructor, and this is Dave Calvert. Dave, thank you so much. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. I appreciate it.
Oh, we're so excited. We talked with Kenyatta in the previous episode, and he's the senior diving instructor, and he had quite the backstory to tell.
Yes, ma'am.
And what I don't think people understand is, first, that this is the only commercial dive program inside a prison, and it's here in California.
Yes, ma'am.
And quite successful. And also, it's now run by two formerly incarcerated who are giving back to this program.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're a certified diver.
Yes.
So, Dave, let's talk about your story now. We heard Kenyatta's story, but I'm fascinated to hear more about your program, or your story as well as the program.
Yeah. So, as you said, I was formerly incarcerated. I had actually started commercial dive. I want to be a commercial diver since I was 16 years old. My cousin was a scuba diver, and he used to get the scuba diving magazines, and I'd see them, and there'd be, "You want to be a commercial diver?" So I went to my cousin. I always emulated him. I looked up to him, and I go, "Hey, this is what I want to do." And he goes, "Only real men do this." So part of me, I think I wanted to prove that I was a real man to him, or whatever it was. So, about 20, when I was 21, 2001, going on 2, I started the program. But unfortunately for me...
You started the program on the outside.
Yes.
Not on the inside.
Yeah. So I started at the College of Oceaneering.
Okay.
I was taking, the physics and everything. And while I was there, I had met a person that was doing work for the college, doing commercial diving. So I got into it. And unfortunately, that led to me getting drunk and going on his boat and taking it for a joyride.
Okay. So that's what got you into prison, incarcerated.
Yeah.
So you got, you were drunk.
Yes, ma'am.
Taking it on a joyride. What happened?
The Coast Guard chased me. I almost hit one of them. Ended up going in the break wall, making a complete fool of myself. I was kind of looking at federal time, but the state picked it up and offered me a deal that I couldn't refuse. So I happened to go to Chino.
And no one was injured during
No,
this?
ma'am. No, ma'am. Yeah. Thankfully, because it probably would have been a lot worse if somebody would have been injured.
Yeah.
But, I get sentenced to 2 years. I go to Chino, and that's when I heard they have a dive program there. So, of course, I applied, and there's kind of a funny story behind that because I wrote a letter to the dive instructor at the time. And, then they tell me that it was closed, so I ended up going to the welding. But
Oh yeah, because the program it was a short closure.
Yes, ma'am.
And it went through just a switch of hands. It ended up back at California Prison Industry Authority, which is formerly, now we're obviously California Correctional Training and Rehabilitation Authority. So anyhow, so you went through that brief closure, but unfortunately it was during your time.
Yes, ma'am.
Got it.
Yeah, so I had wrote a letter to the instructor saying, hey, I started on the streets and I'd like to complete it. But as you said, it closed down in about 2002.
Yes.
And, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to do this program, but, it's closed. So I ended up doing welding in Chino. I leave Chino, I go to Tehachapi, and that's when I...
Now, why did you get sent down to Tehachapi?
Overflow.
Yeah. Okay. This was way back in the day.
Whatever Department of Corrections had their reasoning.
Yes.
So I get sent to Tehachapi, and that's where I was introduced to PIA.
Okay. Prison Industry Authority, but now CalCitra.
Now CalCitra,
Got
yes,
it.
ma'am. And I learned how to sew.
You were a sewer. I love this.
Wasn't the best, you know.
You weren't the best sewer.
No.
But
Gave it
you
my
learned
all.
some skill set, I'm sure.
Yes, ma'am. And that was what was important. I learned how to show up. I learned how to be accountable. I learned how to just, work and be
Yeah, be productive.
be productive, yeah. So I was able to take those skills when I got out and transfer them into real world skills and be productive, be accountable. When I got out, I went back to dive school. And during that time, I took my welding certifications and worked in the refineries. So I'd work at the refineries at night and then go to dive school in the day. Wow. And then go back to work in the refineries at night and became a commercial diver.
Oh, so let's talk a little bit about, I'm going back to your boating accident that was something that you probably don't even want to okay, Michelle, let's just push this to the past. But did you get some self-help in that, inside prison? Did they offer you, I know it was maybe one bad night, but I don't know, was it an alcohol problem that, because people that are listening are going,
yeah,
okay.
I did seek help when I got out. I went to a rehab. My parole officer said, obviously, you have a problem with alcohol. Yeah. So I ended up going to a rehab when I got out.
Okay.
But I didn't, while I was in, I was more focused on trying to better myself and give myself skills to be productive when I got out.
Which is huge.
Yes, ma'am.
Which is huge. And so now you're, okay, you have the skill set, you're a good sewer, and you are a great welder.
Yes, ma'am.
But you do have those job skills.
Yes, ma'am.
So you're out in the real world, you've served your 2 years,
yes, ma'am,
which is quite a short stint in prison. And you're out, and then what?
So like I said, I worked in the refineries, went to school. When I did this, I kind of lost my family. My family was like, hey, really disappointed in my actions and everything. So I had to prove to them that this was never going to happen again.
Yeah.
So when I graduated, my family actually showed up to my graduation, and that meant the world to me. So I've always tried to, do everything to show them that, hey, I appreciate them. Thank you guys.
Yes.
So that was kind of the best benefit of it was, my son got to see me, graduate, make a mistake and, own up to it and graduate. So I got family reunification, which I'm really big on with my guys in the dive program. I stress that, take care of your family.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because whether you like your family or not, you're stuck with them, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But it's a good thing.
Yes,
it's good, and to strengthen those bonds.
Yes, ma'am.
It's so important. So now you end up. How did you end up? So you end up back in prison, but you're now teaching in prison.
Yeah. So
how wonderful is that?
Oh, it's great. Being able to get back to these guys and show them that, hey, I've been where you're at, and, we make mistakes.
Yeah.
But there's nothing you can't do to change your life. Yeah. I remember telling my mom that, hey, I got a job offer to go to prison. And she went, what? She's like, what kind of story are you telling me right now, David? Because it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
And, I told her what I was going to do, and she goes, I think you're perfect for that.
You are perfect. You are perfect. So, and now talk about how you are changing these lives and what does that look like? So you were hired on as assistant diving instructor.
Yes. With
Kenyatta.
Yes. So I met Kenyatta 2013. So we've been friends for quite a time. And, he asked me a year prior to me accepting. And at the time I was still going to school. And I was like, hey, you know what? Let me finish this and we'll see where I'm at. And, he reached out and he's like, I think you're perfect for this job. I really want you to come on. I talked to Jeff Powers, who's Kenyatta's instructor, and he was also mine at the College of Oceaneering. And, finally I said, yeah, I'll come aboard, And, getting to come aboard and watch these guys grow, from, just taking everything me and Kenyatta are giving them, the life skills, how to be accountable, because accountability is 9 times, like the biggest thing.
Oh, yeah. If you can show up to work every day, positive attitude, show up on time.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, we teach them these life skills. And then, we also teach them commercial diving aspects, because this is a real deal commercial dive school. It's worldly recognized, a lot of people in the industry know about it. Chino divers are like, they're known to be really, really good divers,
Yes.
Because their predecessors have went out and done great things.
Yeah, and this program, again, if you're just tuning in, has been around since the 1970s.
Yeah.
And it's the only one of its kind inside a prison.
Yes, ma'am.
Incredible.
Yeah, there's no other, nothing like it.
So let's talk about the day-to-day. What are they learning? What do you do?
So they get in there about 7 a.m. and, the first thing they do is they hop in that pool and they swim their 10 laps. And, rain, shine, cold, snow, whether while there's 80 degrees or 40 degrees, they're in there swimming.
Yeah, I would last with my big toe in and I'd be out. Yeah, so.
That's how I am now.
Yeah.
But after they get their calisthenics, everything, Kenyatta and I both split days. So, one day I'm in the classroom, one day he's in the classroom. So they learn physics, physiology, anatomy, dive medicine. They get certification in CPR, first aid, O2 provider, a Kirby Morgan operator user tech course that Kirby Morgan has authorized us to teach. So they're getting, plus their ADCI,
And that's the Association for Diving Contractors International.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I got this down. Okay, yes.
Which is going to allow them to work anywhere within the United States and ADCI coverage.
That's huge.
Yes.
That's huge. So they get in the water, they learn some curriculum, I've seen the calisthenics.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
do you have some good songs that you still remember back in the day that you can actually?
Not me so much.
Yeah.
Kenyatta's on the cadence. Yeah.
He's on the
Kenyatta
cadence,
does all the cadences
yeah.
and everything. I just get to enjoy and watch it. But, and then we have 4 tanks there. So we, and a big swimming pool, obviously, but we have 4 different tanks that we can train from, and then we have one.
And these are deep tanks,
yeah.
right?
So we have 2 that are 16 feet. I think one inside's 15 feet. And then we have what we call a wet pot. So it's a pot that we can actually pressurize, has water in it. And we can actually pressurize it and get, the students down to 165. 165 feet of seawater,
Wow.
so they get to feel the pressure.
That pressure.
Yeah. And they get to feel what comes with nitrogen narcosis and, all that stuff. So it's really
all
unique.
That fun stuff. Wow,
Yeah.
You're really selling me in on this program. But it's what they need to know
Yes.
to make it and be successful on the outside,
Yes.
correct?
And every single thing we do, it translates into real world working environment. So, and that's what we like to do. We want to give them every chance to be successful.
And since you've been there, Kenyatta's been there, you guys can actually share those stories.
Yes.
I'm going to take a quick break.
All right.
We're going to get back to more of the dive program inside Chino Prison. Fascinating.
If this episode moved you, hit follow and subscribe to the Prison to Purpose podcast. And remember, no matter where you started, you're always one choice away from a better future.
Welcome back to Prison to Purpose, Building Futures Behind Bars. I'm joined by Dave Calvert. We're learning fascinating tidbits about the dive program. And let's expand a little bit more on what it entails to be a Chino diver.
To be a Chino diver has always been an honor. I've worked with a couple. One noticeably is the senior instructor, Kenyatta Kalisana. We worked together in a 2013 project. And I mean, the friendship that we've formed since then, he's actually the one that brought me in. He brought me in, and now I'm there, and it's just this massive warehouse that, there's just so many opportunities in, and this is not scuba diving. This is real deal commercial diving. We have, the 37, which is a 35-pound hat that we wear. It's a helmet that we put on our head.
You call them hats?
Yeah, we call them hats.
Oh, they're heavy hats, 37 pounds.
Oh, yeah. But when they're underwater, they're a lot lighter.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's kind of the cool part about it, is that we have everything you need to train. 30-pound weight belts, wetsuits, and just the teamwork that they have to do to utilize to get in together. Because a diver can't get in by himself. He needs a tender, a supervisor, somebody to talk on the comms. So you have a diver down there, and he's doing a project, he's doing a job. The supervisor can't see what's going on down there, so he relies on the diver. And we have communication from the diver to the supervisor on a box.
And I've seen it, witnessed it. You have the bridge. Do you call it the bridge, or what do you?
Yeah, the deck, the dock. Yeah.
And it looks like something out of like you would see on a ship, or
yes,
right?
Yeah.
And here it's inside prison.
We try to emulate, our the work environment as best as we can within, the gated community they're in.
The gated community.
It's a private gated community.
Yes.
But so we try to give them the best, and me and Kenyatta, we come from the commercial side of diving. So we bring in real life, what's going on, this is what you're going to use. This is how, these are the tools that you're going to use, from spud wrenches, pipe projects. I've gotten flange ups, trying to show them, the big stuff that they're actually going to do. And we're incorporating now ship's husbandry, because a lot of our guys are getting out and getting into ship's husbandry in Long Beach.
What is
ship's
that?
husbandry is basically taking care of ships underwater.
Okay. Cleaning the holes.
Yeah, cleaning the hulls, learning how to take care of the props, pulling props off, and then welding underwater.
Yes. And the dive program itself, I know, has many success stories.
Yes.
You have guys that are working in Los Angeles and in the harbor right there.
One who owns a company.
Another one working in Long Beach who also owns a company.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of success that's just rippled out.
Yeah. So just recently I had a student that graduated, and I also teach at Santa Barbara City College. I teach the underwater welding program there. And my worlds kind of collided because,
Yes.
I had one of my Chino graduates who ran into one of my Santa Barbara graduates, and they're working together. And I mean,
Do they have any idea?
They did. When they started talking,
Then they know.
Yeah, then they go, "Where'd you go to school?" Because that's a common thing with commercial divers. We want to find out where we all went to school.
Yeah.
And I went to Chino. I went to Santa Barbara. Oh, my instructor, and they put two and two together. Then I get a picture of both of them. So it was pretty cool.
Oh, that's very rewarding.
Yes.
And how incredible it is that you can actually give back. And these guys that come into the program, I can imagine they're searching. They want something to change their lives. We talked to Kenyatta, and he was one of those. You're one of those.
Yes.
Where you want to do right. You made that decision. So they're right now like, okay, the light bulb's gone off. I want to make that change. How do you think that you're able to impact them in such a profound way?
Well, as Kenyatta said, we're tangible. You could see us. We're so, and that, I think that's what makes us a really good team, is that we've walked in their shoes.
Yes.
We can actually, hey, it works if you follow our direction. And that's where it is. We teach them life skills. When I first started here, I thought I was just going to be an instructor. Then I found out I'm a counselor.
Yes.
A guy, and I wear so many hats with them and try to, lead them in the right direction. And then we talk to them. you know, hey, this is what needs to go on. You need to change this to get this, you know, and you see the change. When you actually see from when they come in and they have like a chip on their shoulder to when they graduate and they're really respectful and, you know, they're like, hey, thank you. You changed my life. And like, no, I didn't change your life. You changed your life. We just gave you the tools to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and
I bet you get more out of it than sometimes they do.
Yeah. You know, because getting to see these guys succeed and, you know, take care of their families or themselves is the greatest reward.
And the teamwork that goes into it.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Oh, yeah. Again, I think I got off track on that one, but the teamwork, you know, to become a diver, you know, you have to work as a team. You know, you got your diver down there, you got your supervisor, your tender. If any one of those components are gone, you're not going to be able to dive. So, you know, they have to learn how to be a team, you know, and sometimes, you know, different personalities don't mesh well together, you know, but then they watch me and Kenyatta. You know, me and Kenyatta, we bounce off each other. We're coworkers, but we're also friends. We've been friends for a long time. Yeah. And so they see that, and, you know, they see that teamwork and then they go, oh man, this really is a team. And, you know, it's a brotherhood.
Yeah.
You know, the teamwork doesn't just stop in dive school. You know, we're helping them get jobs when they get out. You know, they can call us and say, hey, you know, do you know anybody working or, you know, any jobs? And we help them.
It is. It is quite, it's a very successful network
Yes.
that you have established, all of you, because I see, and Kenyatta and I were talking about this earlier, your recidivism rate in this program is, it's almost next to nothing. I mean, and recidivism meaning returning back to prison. It's like less than, what's it, 7%?
I think it's 7%, yeah.
Which is unheard of nowadays.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's great.
It is wonderful. And that means guys are getting jobs, they're staying out, they're being very productive. And that's what we want in society, right? We
You know,
we want people to be successful.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful part of this job, you know, is knowing that I get to help somebody see their true potential and change their life. You know, never return behind bars again.
That's huge.
You know, and that's the greatest feeling ever.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. And when I want to hear more about the future of dive school and what's ahead.
Okay.
And also maybe a couple stories that you can share. That I know you and Kenyatta have these amazing stories that only our listeners or our viewers, if you're watching this on YouTube, will get to see.
Okay.
All right. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This episode of Prison to Purpose: Building Futures Behind Bars proves that no one is defined by their worst mistake. Every day, incarcerated men and women are rebuilding their lives through job training, mentorship, and second chances. This podcast exists to amplify those voices, stories of true grit and purpose.
Welcome back. We are talking with Dave Calvert. He is the assistant diving instructor at California Institution for Men, Chino diver.
Yes, ma'am.
And CalCitra operates this program. An amazing program it is. It's been back since the 1970s. This program has been running.
Yes.
It's had a couple closed, stints in the meantime due to budgets and things, but it's always been operating for the most part.
Yes, ma'am.
Since the 1970s. And what was just amazing to see is how the brotherhood and how close you guys are, and how we were able to bring back a participant from the 1970s.
Philip
Davis, who graduated from that program. He was one of the originals, one of the original Chino divers, and how he had a lucrative, successful career as a diver.
Oh, yeah.
And he was able to speak at the graduation most recently.
Yeah.
And what did that do to you?
Oh, it was amazing. To get to see a man that completed so far, so long ago, and living a good life, never returned back to prison, and now he's a productive citizen, paying taxes, owns a home, beautiful family. It was great. And hearing his stories, that was awesome. I actually had the privilege of meeting an individual that graduated in the 80s as well. So at one of my gyms, we were talking about this, how small this community is.
Yes.
Tight
knit.
Yeah. I had a commercial dive shirt on, and he goes, "Hey, Dave, you're a diver?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "So was I." And he asked me about our red box, where we do some training in there. And I go, "Were you an instructor?" And he said, "No." "Were you a participant?" It was like, he's like, "Yeah," and now he's a professor at a really prominent college. Wow. And has a couple master's degree and just a great life, Yeah. And then just recently, we have a student that, he was locked up for quite a bit, from a young age, 16 years. And he got out, and, we trained him, start to finish. He got out. He calls us all the time, tells us how great he's doing, when he needs advice or he just wants to talk, And, he was excited because he called us, told us, "I bought my first car ever," and
how does that make you feel?
Oh, it feels great. Yeah. To hear that he's doing great. He was able to buy his first car, and all because, Kenyatta and I were able to help him achieve a goal and learn some kind of skill to be successful. Yeah. And commercial diving has made it successful.
There are so many success stories.
Yes.
Over and over again. And I've heard of stories where they come out of Chino. They actually go and work for search and rescue as divers. We have, it goes on and on and on. And, and a lot of them do get hired, in the Gulf. They're working out in the Pacific.
Yes.
So.
I was a Gulf diver, so I've crossed paths with many Chino divers, and they're workhorses, and that's what they're known as. They're workhorses. They get in, and they will get in the water no matter what. Where we're a little prima donna, they're ready to just jump in. We'll get it done. Don't worry.
Yes.
And that's the Chino diver.
A Chino diver, resilient.
Yes.
Determined.
Yes.
Hardworking. Yes. And positive. Correct.
Yes.
You have that positive atmosphere.
Yeah. The one that just got out, he's always happy and he's always thankful, and I'm like, "You're doing it. You're the reason, I just, I gave you the tools. I said, hey, I pointed you in the direction and you ran with it." So. But
I look at you and Kenyatta, and that's, that's the aura that you have about, like, you're very positive. You only are as good as those mentors in front of you, and you want, I would imagine they emulate what you're dishing out, right?
Yes,
and
ma'am.
What you're dishing out is positivity, hard work, determination, responsibility, but also
change.
You have change and compassion. There's some compassion there too.
You have to have some empathy, and understand that I understand that you're incarcerated, you're away from your family and everything, but you're building a positive foundation to have a better life. And that's what we're teaching them.
Yeah. And you're teaching them leaps and bounds of what other normal instructors. Let's talk a little bit about Instructor of the Year. You knew I was going to bring that up.
Oh, yeah.
Someone here in this podcast studio ended up becoming the Instructor of the Year. And what does that say to you, as well as you just said your family now is so proud of you?
Yeah, you got to meet my cousin.
I did.
The one that I emulate, it's so great. It caught me off guard, when my boss calls me and tells me, "Hey, we need to talk." "Oh, what happened?" And she told me, and it, just to see, how invested you guys are into me, and how much Calcitra cares about us, me and Kenyatta, and myself. It was great, and to be able to share that experience with my family was awesome. Yeah. And the and my students, my incarcerated students, they were happy as heck, and it was great.
Did they give you a hard time, or were they? Yeah.
A little bit, Oh, look, we got the Instructor of the Year.
Instructor of the Year, yes.
But
roll out the red carpet.
Just being able to, be recognized by CalCitra for that. It was amazing, you know, and I mean, the board,
Yes.
Secretary McComber, you know,
Yeah.
everybody. So
Yeah.
it was great.
Here you have the Secretary of all of Corrections honoring you.
Yeah.
And you were formerly incarcerated.
Yeah.
So it does happen,
Yes.
right?
Oh,
How
yes.
you can just flip that script on your life. And
Yes, ma'am. You know, just because you've been incarcerated doesn't mean that's the end. You
Exactly.
know, you can always flip it and become a positive person. And you could be sitting where I'm sitting,
Yeah.
you know, in prison, you know, helping people change their lives.
And that's what you're doing.
And that's what I'm doing.
And we thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining us on this podcast.
Thank you, guys. I
Oh,
appreciate
it's
having
been
me.
wonderful just hearing about your story and Kenyatta's story. So thank you again for just joining us today on Prison to Purpose, Building Futures Behind Bars. Remember, you can subscribe, follow us, share us, do whatever it takes. Spread the word. We are so grateful that you joined us today. And remember, I always love this, and this just closes it all up because this is what you were just saying. Hope doesn't stop behind the gate.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Prison to Purpose podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to hit follow, subscribe, and stay connected with us for more real stories, real growth, and real transformation. Share this episode with someone who needs a little strength today. We'll see you next time.